second day for this first section. I'm recording a video. Alright, sorry about that, guys. Second day for this first section, simplifying and verifying trigonometric identities. So, simplifying. So on this first one, when I am simplifying this, I want to first look for maybe I can change some of these things to sine and cosine. So I want to make sure I remember that. Change to sine and cosine. So this is already sine, this is cosine, this is already sine. Okay, well, that didn't help me a whole lot here. Don't worry, it will come in later. So for this one, my next method, or next thing I'm going to try is factoring out. So when I look at these, I decide, is there anything that they have in common that I could factor out of them? And they both have that sine x. So I'm going to factor that out of both of them. So I'm left with cosine squared x minus 1. Think of this just like you would have done if this was 24 minus 3. You would have brought out your 3 and you'd be left with 8 minus 1. And I made that 24x, but you can't simplify it. Same thing, so I'm factoring out what they both have in common. Then I look at this cosine squared minus 1. That looks familiar to me, and if I think about my Pythagorean identities, there's actually one that says 1 plus sine plus cosine squared equals 1. So cosine squared is really cosine squared I'm going to keep, minus 1 is really the same thing as sine squared plus cosine squared. Did not change my sine x out here. Cosine squared minus a cosine squared is going to cancel, and so I'm just left with negative sine squared x, and then times your sine x out here. Sine times sine would be sine squared, and similarly sine times sine squared is sine cubed x, and it would be a negative because this was a negative right here. So my most simplified answer is negative sine cubed x. Second one. First thing I do, change to sine and cosine, just like I did over here. So this is sine x, there we go, plus cotangent is cosine x over sine x, and then this was times cosine x. I would go ahead and probably simplify that a little bit to make that cosine squared x over sine x for that second term. My sine x out front I did not do anything to. So I changed to sine and cosine. I really don't want to factor anything out since even though they both have sine, this sine is in the denominator. I am adding though, and this is a fraction, so I'm going to find a common denominator. So my common denominator is going to be sine x, because this is like being sine x over 1. So for my first term, to get that to be over sine x, I would have multiplied by sine x. So now that's sine squared x. The second term was already over sine x, so I can just keep my cosine squared x there. Sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. So I have 1 over sine x, which is definitely very simple. However, I could go a little simpler, get rid of that fraction. 1 over sine is cosecant. We will be working on different tools to use. Always want to look at this changing to sine and cosine. Factoring out is an option. Over here we found our common denominator. Okay, we will make a list of some of our options. We do want to make sure we are going through these options as we're trying to do these and just rewriting things using those trig identities that are in your trig book. So for simplifying, you're trying to get it as simple as possible. For verifying, you are manipulating one side to try to make it look the same as the other. So I'm going to choose my most complicated side, which would be this one on this first problem, and I'm going to start simplifying it. So I'm going to start by writing with sine and cosine. So cosine x, instead of secant, I'll make that 1 over cosine x minus cosine squared x equals sine squared x. Do not change that right side. Cosine times 1 over cosine would just be 1. So now I have 1 minus cosine squared x equals sine squared x. Sorry. I'm trying to get this to change color. And it's not, so I apologize. I was trying to get color change there. Because I'm just kind of thinking in my head. I can't obviously show you my head or show you my trig book, but you do have in front of it. One of your trig identities, one of your Pythagorean identities, in fact, is sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. I can do like I did on the previous problem, where instead of cosine squared here, I write that, or sorry, instead of 1, sorry, I write that as sine squared plus cosine squared. So I had sine squared plus cosine squared minus cosine squared, which then would give me sine squared. I can also, as I get better at using these, think of manipulating this a little bit. So if I subtracted this cosine squared over, so this was 1 minus cosine squared, I can tell just by looking at that Pythagorean identity that that is the same thing as sine squared. So you will get to some of these where you get used to using them and you're a little bit faster with them. Do keep in mind too, in a lot of these, there's going to be different ways to do it. Okay. Now that my left side equals my right side, I am finished. On the second one, I instantly notice that these are just, there's fractions going on over here. I also notice that everything is already sine and cosine, so I'm not going to mess with that any. I am going to go ahead and try to get a common denominator. So I'm just going to multiply these two. Just like if this was 1/3 plus 1/4, your common denominator would be 12. So here my common denominator is 1 plus cosine x times sine x. For this first term, I had to multiply by sine x, so this is now sine squared x. For the second term, I had to multiply by 1 plus cosine x. So cosine times 1 would be cosine x. Cosine times cosine is cosine squared x. I went ahead and distributed on this part instead of on the bottom, because when I distribute this cosine, I just ended up with cosines and cosine squared. If I had distributed on here, I would have ended up with a cosine sine, and now I've involved two trig functions all at once, and I don't want to mess with doing that, if at all possible. Did not change my right side any. Looking to simplify that now that I have my common denominator, sine squared plus cosine squared is 1. So on top I have 1 plus cosine x. On the bottom I have 1 plus cosine x times sine x. Did not change my right side, whoops, cosine x. Both the top and bottom have that 1 plus cosine x, so those cancel. Okay, I brought everything off of the top, so I'm left with a 1 on top. On the bottom is sine x, or denominator rather. Did not change that right side. 1 over sine x is cosecant x, so cosecant x equals cosecant x. My left side now says the exact same thing as my right side, so I'm finished. Be sure you come in with some questions tomorrow on these and with these finished, or sorry, with this written down so that I can see it.